Evening, everybody. I wish I could be with you tonight, but I have to be out of town for an event. So we're going to watch a video tonight of a presentation that I gave 12 years ago. So as Joe said to me after I showed it to him, we were all a lot younger 12 years ago, including me. So what you're about to see, I felt like just needed a little disclaimer. I had every intention of redoing this whole presentation for you to make it really fresh and sharp and whatnot, with better graphics as opposed to what was available 12 years ago, but I don't have the time. And actually the content that's in this, despite some of the graphics and whatnot, I just think is really good. So I pray that you'll sit back, enjoy yourselves, and learn a little bit more about why Rome is so significant for us as Catholics. And I pray that this presentation will ground in history all the things that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the grave of St. Peter and everything that was around that original grave, which has now become St. Peter's Basilica. And I pray that as we do this, as we continue to explore history, we just see that the faith is not myths and fairy tales, but it's grounded in God's concrete action in particular times, in particular people, including you and me. So enjoy, and I'll see you next week.
All right, let's pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father, we praise and thank you for these glorious days of Easter, which we continue to celebrate in the church. We thank you for the great gift of your Son, for his death and resurrection, his ascension to new life. We thank you for the gift of your Holy Spirit who dwells within us, who never ceases to call us to a new and more abundant life. Father, we thank you for giving us the privilege and the gift of living in these days where there are so many opportunities to share the gospel and to speak of your Son and of the great things that you have done for everyone through him. Help us not to miss the opportunities that you bring to us. Help us always to make the most of them and to help people come into a deeper relationship with you. We thank you tonight in a particular way for the gift of the apostles. We thank you for Peter and all his brothers and all their successors. We pray that through the intercession of St. Peter and his brother apostles that you would give courage and wisdom and charity to all bishops across the world, and in a particular way to our Holy Father, Pope Benedict. Help them to be good shepherds, courageous and wise and filled with love. And help us all to do our part to put out into the deep, and to let down our own nets for a catch of fish, and to draw many men and women to you. All this we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen. Son, and the Holy Spirit. All right. Well, it's a privilege to take you tonight on something of a virtual tour to Rome. Some of you know I had the great good fortune of being able to live and study in Rome for 4 years back in the early 90s. And all the seminarians in Rome are entrusted with particular ministry. So some guys work high school retreats. I did that for a little while. Some guys work with Mother Teresa's sisters. Some guys work in some of the soup kitchens with the homeless. Some guys work in all sorts of different apostolates. I had the opportunity for almost the whole time I was there, maybe 3.5 years, of doing the apostolate, which was taking people underneath the Basilica, which is St. Peter's. So, how many people have been to Rome? Right. How many people have been on what's known as the Scavi tour? Okay, the excavations. Okay. How many of you who've been to Rome have never heard of the Scavi tour? All right, some of us. All right. This is one of the hidden gems of Rome. What the tour is it's an opportunity to go actually underneath the ground of St. Peter's. So if you've been to St. Peter's, you know that there's not only the main floor, but then there's a floor underneath it, which is where now Pope John Paul II is buried. That's known as the crypt, or the grotto. And oftentimes people, when they're down there, they think they're going to the grave of Peter, but you don't. You're just walking around the grave of a number of different popes and some other various dignitaries from years past. The excavations, scavi is just the Italian word for excavations. The excavations actually take you below the level of the grotto or the crypt. In fact, if you've been to Rome and you've been on the grotto, it's not unusual for you as you're walking along the floor of the grotto to hear voices coming from underneath you. Those aren't the souls of hell crying out. Those are the people on the scavi tour. So they're not supposed to talk, but they do anyway. So that's what's going on. So we're going to try to, for those of us who've been there, it'll be somewhat easier. Hopefully it'll still work for those of us who have not been there as well. Pilgrimages are significant. When we did our Theology on Tap on Pope Benedict's Spirit of the Liturgy, we talked an awful lot about the significance of time and space for Christians and for Catholics in particular. And there's great significance because God acts always in history. He does things in concrete lives, in concrete places. So you go to Jerusalem because he lived there. He died there. You can stand at Golgotha. I've had the privilege of saying Mass at Golgotha. I've had the privilege of saying Mass in the tomb, or the remains which are above the tomb. You go to those places because not only did God do great things in precisely those places, but then Christians for 2 millennia now have gone to those places, seen what God did in those places, kind of experienced the testimony of all the people down through the ages, and have left rejuvenated, reinvigorated, eager to come home and to tell others about what it is that they've experienced. So, even for us tonight, for those of us who've never been to Rome, or for those of us who have, tonight is really a pilgrimage. It's a virtual pilgrimage. But it's a pilgrimage. It's a chance for us to get in touch with the time of our Lord, as well as these 2,000 years that have gone since then. But it's also a chance for us to get in touch with the actual figure of someone who knew Jesus. And it's for that reason that the excavations are really the highlight of all of Rome. Because we will culminate at the grave of a man who was there when Jesus said, "Do this in memory of me." And we've been doing it ever since. Every morning around an altar where we continue to partake of the extraordinary gift that is the body and the blood of Jesus made present for us under the appearance of bread and wine. So hopefully this will be not merely an archaeological tour or a little walk through history, but a true experience for us to come into contact with the Lord. So I have lots of pictures of St. Peter's. One of the noteworthy things of St. Peter's is the original laser pointer, I think. This is circa 1980. But is this here? This is an obelisk. Okay, so these are Egyptian monuments. They're quite old. This is actually brought from Egypt in the year 37. So the Emperor Caligula brought this from Egypt. It was actually about a third bigger than this. It broke off down here, and the ship that used to carry it, or that carried it from Hierapolis in Egypt to its location in the Vatican, sunk in the Tiger River. Part of the boat is still sitting there in the Tiger River, but much of this is still there. This saw almost certainly the Exodus. So immediately when you walk into St. Peter's, you're not only surrounded by beauty and enormity. I mean, St. Peter's is massive. And yet it's all made to feel small. The whole point of the arms, the colonnade in front of St. Peter's, is the sense that Holy Mother is pulling you in. That's the point. And then you walk into the Basilica, and it's the largest church in Christendom, huh? And as soon as you walk in, you go Pietas over on your right. And then there's holy water fonts that are, these little cherubs. And you walk in and you stick your finger in the holy water font. And you look, wow, this is really beautiful. And then someone says to you, did you realize that the holy water font is 6 feet tall? You go, oh my gosh. But it doesn't feel that way at all because of the style of architecture that St. Peter's is built in. It's not made to dwarf you in the way that Gothic architecture does. It's made actually to make you feel at home and to make you feel welcome. So, not only do you have these experiences, but then you see, too many remote controls. You see the obelisk, and you realize, okay, I'm looking at something that Moses saw. So I'm in touch with the Exodus and of God's deliverance of his people from affliction in Egypt. And all of a sudden you realize we don't believe in fables and fairy tales and myths. We believe in a God who constantly works through human history. And that's part of it. So this obelisk then is the center point of the piazza in front of it. It was moved to its present location by a man named Sixtus V. He was a pope. He moved every single obelisk in ancient Rome into its present location. So he kind of revamped the city and made it look like it looks. Now the reason that we start there is because here again you can see the obelisk right back there. That's the obelisk. What we've done is that the colonnade of St. Peter's is back here. We're now behind the church, okay, behind the Basilica. Over here is the entryway into the sacristy, and this is the entryway into the office of the excavations. And right here, there's a plaque. And this is where all the tours of the Scavi begin, because this plaque marks what was the original spot of that obelisk. So this here tells you that the obelisk was moved by Sixtus V in 1586 from this location to that location. In fact, it took so long to move this that there are etchings and engravings of the time, because one of the mysteries of the obelisk, if you go watch the History Channel and things like that, not only the pyramids, which we're dumbfounded by, but the way they got these things erected is still mystifying to us, and the ease with which the Egyptians moved them. And the Romans moved it pretty easily from Egypt to Rome in the 1st century, but in the 16th century, when they tried to move it just that little bit from here, or from here to here, it took months. So we're still kind of amazed by that. And then finally, as St. Peter's is being rebuilt, some of us probably know that we're celebrating the 500th anniversary of the beginning of St. Peter's. There's actually been 2 St. Peter's basilicas. We'll see that as we go along. This is a painting from the time of the rebuilding of the basilica, so we can still see the beginnings of the dome, but there's no top to it yet. But the obelisk has already been moved from its present or its former location, which was over there, to here. Now the reason why that's so significant is because if you were to stand in this spot in the year 64, right here, you'd be standing smack dab in the middle of what was known as the circus. Not a big top and a ring, but this is a circus. This was known as the circus of the Emperor Caligula and Nero. So Caligula and Nero spanned from the 30s until the 60s, the end of the 60s. And this circus was built by these 2 emperors, and it was used for a variety of different things. Animal exhibitions, gladiatorial fights, a variety of other things as well, as we'll come to see. So if you're standing on that square outside of the ground, at the time of the year 64, you'd be 30 feet lower, and you'd be standing right there. And if you were looking north, which is where the Basilica is today, you'd be looking at a hill, a huge hill called the Vatican Hill, the Mons Vaticanus in Latin. Vatican is not a Christian name or a Catholic name or a papal name. Its origins come from the Etruscan periods. We're not quite sure what exactly it means, although it seems to have something to do with communion with the gods. So if you're standing in that circus in the year 64, or where that obelisk was, this is where you'd be. So here's another inside view of, this was what the Circus Maximus would have looked like. Circus Maximus was an enormous complex which seated somewhere close to 300,000 people in the ancient city of Rome. The circus of Caligula Nero seated between 50 and 70,000 people. It was 200 meters long, so it's much bigger than the size of a football field today. Now, the reason why that's significant is because in the year 64, and in the month of July of the year 64, a fire takes place in Rome. The fire started at the old Circus Maximus, the area around the old circus, which is the inside view that we just saw a minute ago. Sorry, I'm getting on your way here. And it destroys maybe 3/4 of the ancient city, which was at that time built almost entirely out of wood. Nero, this is a bust of the Emperor Nero, so if you ever want to look at the face of a man who was beyond a megalomaniac, that's his face. Nero is the emperor at the time. In what was truly a rare moment of generosity on his part, he gave the area of the circus, and as well as what was known as the Gardens of Nero, which was around the Vatican Hill, for all the homeless and the refugees to come and spend time on because they had nowhere to go. So he gives that to them. But then, shortly after the fire destroys the city of Rome, pressure begins to mount on Nero because the populace of Rome thinks and begins to spread the rumor that he's actually started the fire himself with the intention of being able to rebuild Rome according to how he wanted it. We aren't certain that that's true, although it seems to be the case. Nero, as I mentioned, was beyond an egomaniac. He's a megalomaniac who wanted to put his own stamp on ancient Rome. So, shortly after these happen, after the fire happens and the pressure mounts on Nero, Nero begins to try to find a scapegoat to take the pressure off himself. And the scapegoat is the Christians. And so, in the month of October of the year 64, begins the first systematic persecution by the Roman Empire against the Christians. And it happened in the circus. And we have a great depiction and rendering of the persecutions in the circus by a Roman historian whose name is Tacitus, who's writing in the late 1st century. And Tacitus writes, Nero substituted as culprits, and punished with the utmost refinements of cruelty, a class of men, loathed for their vices, whom the crowd styled Christians. Christus, the founder of the name, had undergone the death penalty in the reign of Tiberius by sentence of the procurator Pontius Pilate. By the way, this is the oldest non-Christian reference to Pontius Pilate and to Jesus' death under his reign. And the superstition was checked for a moment, only to break out once more, not merely in Judea, the home of the disease, but in the capital itself, where all things horrible or shameful in the world collect and find a vogue. First, then, the confessed members of the sect were arrested. Next, on their disclosures, vast numbers were convicted, not so much on account of arson as for hatred of the human race. So, the official crime that the Christians were killed for was just that. They were considered to be enemies of the human race. That was why they were killed. And in fact, they were considered to be atheists. How ironic. Because the Christians would not worship the pantheon, or the multitude of gods that the Romans had. They would only worship the one God, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So they're killed for being enemies of the human race. And derision accompanied their end. And this is how the Christians died in the circus in the fall of the year 64. They were covered with wild beast skins and torn to death by dogs. They were fastened on crosses, and when daylight failed, were burned to serve as lamps by night. So they actually used to cover the Christians in pitch and tar, and then they'd mount them on a pole, and then they'd put the pole on a wall, back like these here. And then this would be all around the area of the circus and the gardens, so that Nero's games could go around the clock, 24 hours a day. Because remember, the people are bored. They've got no homes. Nero had offered his gardens for the spectacle and gave an exhibition in his circus, mixing with the crowd in the habit of a charioteer. If you've seen the movie Gladiator, and you see Commodus, who's portrayed in that, Commodus is a bit like Nero. Were mounted on his car. Hence, in spite of a guilt which had earned the most exemplary punishment, there arose a sentiment of pity due to the impression that they were being sacrificed not for the welfare of the state, but to the ferocity of a single man. So that's Tacitus telling us about the persecutions at the time of Nero. Now, Peter dies in those persecutions. He dies certainly in the year 64, almost certainly in the month of October 64, and we even think we can date his death to October 13th of the year 64. We do that by a couple of different second century sources. After he's buried, he should have been thrown into the Tiber River, because the Christians are considered by Nero, and then will be continually considered until Constantine in the 4th century, to be not members of a legal religion, but members of an illegal superstition. And as such, they're not afforded any rights, least of all, the right to burial. So it was something like the ultimate insult for the ancients, not to be buried. In their mind, it meant that the soul would forever wander. So Peter's body should have been pitched into the Tiber River, which was just across the area from the Vatican. If you've been to Rome, then you know that the Vatican, St. Peter's, is actually on the other side of the Tiber River from the rest of the city. Somehow, however, the Christians get a hold of Peter's body. Either they steal it, they bribe somebody, who knows? Much like maybe Joseph of Arimathea and some of the others get a hold of Jesus' body after Jesus is executed at the time of Pilate. And then they took it and they buried it in a really simple, shallow earthen grave, which was just covered with tiles. So if you can imagine something like a tent, just a V shape coming up out of the ground. So you dig a simple 2-foot deep grave in the ground, and then on top of the grave, you fill it in with dirt, and then on top of that, you put slate tiles resting up against each other, and it looks like a pop tent. Maybe sticking out, like maybe halfway up to your shin. That's Peter's grave. Because the Christians, they bury him, but they can't let anybody know that it's Peter. Right? If they do, they're going to find the grave, they're going to throw it into the Tiber River. So they have to mark it in such a way so that it blends. And they bury him in an area just on the north side of the circus. So if you can remember the picture that we had of the circus right here. And then on the north side, we said was the Vatican Hill. Right? So they take his body, they go around the other side of the circus, and they put him there. Why there? Because there's already, in the 1st century, what they would call like a potter's field, where some of the poorer people in Rome had been buried. The Romans, just like all the ancient cultures, forbade people from being buried inside the city. They did that not only because they were superstitious, they didn't want ghosts walking around at night, but also because they were afraid of disease. So they built what were called not cemeteries, but necropoli, or in the singular would be a necropolis, which literally just means the city of the dead, of which this is a picture. So they would build these cemeteries, what we would call cemeteries, outside the city walls, and the area where St. Peter's is now turns out to be the place where a necropolis is built. At the time of Peter, though, it's just like a potter's field. In fact, you can just see faintly here, there's a set of stones coming up out of the ground. That's one of those simple kind of potter's graves, inside of which Peter would have been buried. So he's buried in this kind of a thing. And then this is a picture of, if you fly into Rome, you drive through or past a little town called Ostia. Ancient city of Ostia is where St. Augustine's mother Monica dies. This is a picture of the necropolis from Ostia. So this is the exact same time period. It's 1st, 2nd, 3rd century as the necropolis, which is built right around Peter's grave. So a potter's field in the year 64, late 1st century, early 2nd century, and then 3rd and 4th century, this same kind of structure gets built. So this is a series of homes for the dead, with doorways, places for people to sit, and where they would actually celebrate a funeral rite. So they would celebrate what's known as a refrigerium, where they would bring wine and food, and they would share it with the dead. They would come there on the anniversary of someone's death, and they would have a picnic with the deceased, and they'd share food with them. So this is what was being built right around Peter's time. So Peter's built on, or his grave is built on the slope of the Vatican Hill, okay, which slopes from south to north. If you've been to Rome, you know that Roman reign is pretty fierce. You can see why they had storm gods. It just thunders like crazy and echoes through the valleys that are left by the mountains which surround the city, or the hills that surround the city. So, because Peter's grave is built on a hill, and because erosion is so strong, the Christians end up having to build a series of brick walls, just simple brick walls, on top of the tile grave, because the tile graves get covered by erosion. And they do that probably around the year 80 or so, roughly 20 years after Peter's dies. They then, about another 20 years later, build another series of brick walls right on top of the first series of brick walls, because the first series is getting covered by erosion too. So from the year 100 already, you've got 3 levels of Peter. You got his grave, the brick walls on top of his grave, and the brick walls on top of the brick walls on top of the grave. And that's all St. Peter's is. It's one monument on top of another monument, 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 all on top of his grave. Which then brings us to this little complex here. This is known by a couple of different names. It's known as either the Red Wall Complex or the Trophy of Gaius. The reason for that is the wall, right here, is actually painted red. It's red plaster. It's also known as the Trophy of Gaius because Gaius is a priest writing in Rome roughly around the year 200, and he gets into a debate with a guy who lives over in Asia Minor, someplace. I'm trying to think of the city. But the guy from Asia Minor is trying to claim significance to the city in which he lives. And he says, you should come to the city where I live, because if you come there, you'll see the tomb of the deacon Philip, and you'll see his daughter's grave. And Gaius writes back basically saying, that's nice, who cares? Come to Rome, and I'll take you to what he calls to the Ostian Way, and I'll show you what he calls the Trophy of Paul, and I'll take you to the Vatican, and I'll show you what he calls the Trophy of Peter. This is the trophy that he's referring to. It's a funeral monument, and it's a significant statement because Gaius tells us that he writes it in such a way as to say, everybody knows that this is there, and also it must clearly be on top of Peter's grave, because if it wasn't, it wouldn't make much sense from the context of the argument that he's in. This is what the trophy looks like. Okay? So if you can remember, this is the area where the circus is. Okay? This is the Vatican Hill, which begins to slope up. You with me? All right. So this is just like the picture that we saw of the necropolis outside in Ostia. This is what the area that is now St. Peter's once looked like. It was all these funeral mausoleums. So people would just walk in, visit the dead, have a meal, come back out, go home. And this is the Red Wall Complex. And now you can see the red plaster wall. This complex here is built roughly between the ages 146 and 161. We know that. We know that mainly because of this little alleyway back here. And this alleyway, we can tell from architecture, is built at exactly the same time as this complex. The alleyway actually provides for a drain and some runoff so that the water coming down the hill can run down through the drain and then out, and it doesn't clog up the whole cemetery. Well, drains in ancient times were made with clay tiles, and the clay tiles were stamped with the owner of the factory who made the tiles, much like we continue to do with some fabrications. This is a photo, it's a little blurry, sorry about that, of one of those tiles. Here's the stamp. Looks like that up close. This is significant because the owner of the factory happened to be a man named Marcus Aurelius, who in the year 161 becomes the emperor, his name is Aurelius Caesar, the emperor. He becomes the emperor in 161 and takes a new name, Marcus Aurelius. His name on the title is Marcus Aurelius, so it has to be from that time frame there. His wife also is a co-owner of the factory. His wife's name was Faustina until the year 147, which he changes her name to Faustina Augusta. And her name on the tile is Faustina Augusta. So the tiles have to be made between the years 146 and 161. So we allow a few years or decade, whatever, for them to run out of circulation and be reused or whatever. But if you say that this monument is built roughly in the middle of the 2nd century, less than 100 years after Peters dies, you have a really safe guess. This column here is marked for us simply because this is actually still visible today. So as you're walking through the excavations at St. Peter's, you can see this, and you can see parts of the remains of this trophy of Gaius This is actually a quote that he says, "I can show you the trophies of the apostles. If you care to go to the Vatican or to the road to Ostia, thou shalt find the trophies of those who have founded this church." So we titled tonight's talk, "Why Rome is Home." And the answer to that is because that's where Peter and Paul died. That's the significance of Rome for us. So quick review, huh? July 64, fire of Rome. October 64, Peter's martyred and buried. Roughly the year 80, because of erosion, a series of walls are built atop his original grave. Roughly 100, again due to erosion, more walls are built. And then sometime between 146 and 161, the Red Wall complex, the Trophy of Gaius, is constructed. Now, everything changes drastically in the year 312, on October 28th, when a guy named Constantine, who, if you've read the Da Vinci Code, you know much about, not much of it is true, has a vision. This is a painting of the vision. The vision is, you can't see it, it's actually over here, sorry about that, but it's of a cross. So Constantine is one of two rival emperors of the western part of the Roman Empire, which at the time was divvied up between an eastern and a western segment. And Constantine is not a Christian. His father is a monotheist. He's a worshiper of the sun god. But he's not a Christian at all, although his mom is. Constantine, on the eve of his battle, which is what's depicted in this painting, has a vision of a cross. And underneath the cross, or above the cross, or somewhere near the cross, are the words, "In this sign conquer." And so Constantine, that night, has all his soldiers paint the cross on his shield. And they go out the next day under the banner of the cross, and they rout Maxentius. They do this the battle happens at a bridge called Milvia, which you can still see today. It's roughly near the Olympic Stadium if you go to Rome. So this is a picture of that battle. And then afterwards, Constantine attributes his victory to Jesus and goes on a series of building crusades to places which are significant for Christians. He builds 4 major churches. He builds lots of things, but he builds 4 major churches. One is in Bethlehem. This is just a little simple model of the Basilica that Constantine builds in the place where Jesus is born. He builds this. This is at least the foundations of this. This is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. So it rests on top of Golgotha, where Christ is crucified, as well as on top of the tomb. So inside this is actually the reason, contrary to what Dan Brown says, this is the reason why churches are in the round. Because Constantine's church encloses 2 monuments. One is Golgotha, and then one is this round structure which was called the Anastasis, which is from what our patroness's name comes from, Anastasia. Anastasis means the resurrection. So the Anastasis is this round structure built directly on top of the tomb of Jesus. He also builds in Rome, this is the facade of the outside of the Church of St. Paul, which is built on top of the trophy of St. Paul. And then he builds this. This is the first St. Peter's, or the Vatican Basilica, as it was known. And he starts building this roughly around the year 330. You can see the obelisk right back here, which is its original location, which is where that little plaque on the ground stands, which now is somewhere out here. All right. Now, Constantine has a bit of a dilemma. He wants to build a monument in memory of Peter. That's why he's building this. But the Christians tell him that if he's going to do that, he has to build it directly on top of Peter's grave. The reason that's a problem is because Peter's buried on a hill. In fact, he's buried on the slope of a hill. And this area here, which is right in front of the Vatican Hill, is where a wonderfully flat piece of land rests. This is where the circus was. It's pretty ideal for building a church. A hill is not a good place for building a hill or building a basilica. So Constantine decides, for whatever reason, to cut off the top of the hill and move all this, which just keeps going. He moves 1 million cubic feet of dirt, making it probably the largest building project in antiquity. And then he takes all of this and moves it here, and then puts these huge retaining walls so as to provide the foundation for the floor of of his basilica. Now, this is a necropolis. An active pagan necropolis. This is where Roman citizens come regularly to visit their loved ones who have died. So think about that for a moment. Why would Constantine move 1 million cubic feet of dirt into an area which is still being used by the majority of the Roman population, which is Christian, which is pagan? Now, there's only roughly 8% of the population that are Christian. Fill it in and build a monument to a man who, before his time, was the leader of the enemy of the human race. It makes no sense. Especially when you know that this is a wonderfully flat piece of land. The only reason that Constantine can do that is because the Christians say, well, that's fine. You want to build us a monument to Peter? This is where you got to build it because that's where he's buried. You with me? So, in order to do this, he has to repeal a law. It's forbidden to desecrate a law in ancient times. Constantine actually repeals the law, makes it no longer forbidden to do that, fills in the cemetery, or fills in the necropolis, and then builds his church. A few perks to being the emperor. Kind of an interesting little thing happening when Constantine's doing that, because all the pagans are obviously moving their families, loved ones out, so they can continue to celebrate these funeral meals that they celebrate. So the pagans are moving out, and the Christians are moving in. Because the Christians want to be near Peter's body, as close to Peter's body as they can get, because it was the Christian understanding that a martyr, when he dies, or when she dies, actually comes physically into contact with the risen Christ. And so there was always a desire for those who had died subsequent to that to be buried near Peter's body because of the grace that it was to be near someone who actually comes into contact with the risen Christ. This is just it's only part of the sketch, sorry, but this structure here, which is cut off, is the present St. Peter's Basilica. This is Constantine's Basilica. So this was a massive structure. It gives you an idea of just how much larger this is here. And then you can see down here, these are just a couple of sketches. This is the excavations that have been unearthed. Okay? This is the main altar in St. Peter's today. And these are some of the mausoleums that have been found, as we'll see, beginning back in 1939. Now, if you were to walk inside St. Peter's Basilica, this is what you would have seen at the center of it, or at the back of it. You wouldn't have seen an altar. In fact, there is no permanent altar in St. Peter's until the year 600 or so, when Gregory the Great built one. The purpose of this was, and the purpose of the basilica, was to be a funeral basilica in memory of Peter. So what they had was portable altars, which they would move around and say Mass inside the basilica. But this structure here is a monument built by Constantine. He builds this thing here somewhere around the year 330. And inside of this, and underneath it, are all the monuments we've seen so far. So, inside here is the red wall complex from 160, which sits atop the brick walls from 100, which sits atop the brick walls from 80, which rests atop the tile grave from 64. Right? And it was a common thing for pilgrims to come. They would take a string with different objects connected to it, coins, whatever, and there was a spot here on the floor for them to lower them down and to leave overnight, and then to come back again the next day or upon their next return, much like our understanding of getting something blessed. So they would lower it down to get into contact with the apostles' grave, and then bring back, just like we see in the Acts of the Apostles. You know, the people would line up on the streets. Acts tells us that Peter's shadow would fall upon them. People would try to touch Paul and his cloak. So we see signs of these things already in the Acts of the Apostles, and then we just continue on. Around this church, we see these kind of interestingly shaped columns. Those columns are actually still in the church today. Here they are again. By the way, we know exactly what this looks like because of this. This is a little wooden chest which is overlaid with silver, which has etchings on one side of the inside of Holy Sepulchre, and here on this side, you see the inside of St. Peter's. So here's Constantine's monument inside of which is the red wall on top of all the other things. Here are pilgrims coming to pray. Here are these kind of twisted columns that wrap around it. Okay? So he builds this box inside here, this thing, out of marble and porphyry. Marble is, obviously, we know that. Porphyry, we may not know, porphyry is a semi-precious stone. It's purple in color. It's very significant because purple can only be worn or used for the graves of someone who is at least of senatorial class. So we see, was it Lydia in Acts, who dyes color, she dyes wool purple. She's a well-paid employee. She's working for somebody of significant rank, because purple isn't just like something you can pull off the rack. So this is, again, these columns here. This is what one of them looks like. This is in the Vatican Museum right now. And these are still in the church today. If you walk, this is the high altar in St. Peter's. And all around the kind of four main spots around the high altar are reliquaries. So this is a statue of St. Helena, Constantine's mother, holding a cross. She's the one who finds the true cross. Above her, here's those columns which were back in the original basilica, right here. Now they rest up here. And then here's a reliquary of the true cross. And then we've got another reliquary. Here's Helena again. This is St. Andrew, and above him is a reliquary flanked by two of those columns of St. Andrew's head. This is Veronica, and above her is two columns in Veronica's veil. That's it. There's four. So, 1939, Pope Pius IX dies, and fun begins with the excavations. Pius has in his will that he wants to be buried in the crypt near Peter's grave, next to Pius. Excuse me, this is Pius X dies, not Pius IX. And Pius X has in his will he wants to be buried next to Pius IX. So they start to dig for Pius X's grave. And as soon as they do that, they strike the top of these ancient mausoleums that we looked at. And this is just a little photo from inside what they begin to find. So these are the first photos of the excavations. This whole area from 30 feet below the floor of the crypt all the way to the crypt is full of this. Not mud, but brick and mortar. It's all the things that Constantine fills in so as to provide a foundation for the floor of St. Peter's. All right? So 4 excavators plus about 6 workers from St. Peter's unearthed the excavations during World War II, while Rome, for most of the time, is an occupied city by the Nazis. So, you can't just drive a dump truck into the front of the Piazza of St. Peter's and start unloading things because you're in the middle of a world war. So they do this all somewhat hush-hush. The excavations begin in 1940. They go until 1949, 50, 51, dated in different ways. And then in 1950, the official Vatican report gets published. So here's just a look at all the fun these guys are having. This is some more shots of the from the excavators of what they found when they opened up the grave. So this is again all the brick and mortar and whatnot. And this is what they strike when they start digging for Pius IX's grave, or Pius X's grave. The top of these mausoleums, and they start looking at this, going, "Uh-oh, I think there's something down here," and they begin to rip it up. More fun shots of all the insides of St. Pete's. And then this is one of the streets of this necropolis. So now, this is the floor of the basilica, the crypt part of the basilica, which is one level below St. Pete's. Okay? And now you're 30 feet below that, or 20 feet below that, another 10 before the main floor. And this, if you were walking in it in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or beginning of the 4th century, you'd be outside getting a tan. But now it's enclosed, because it was all filled with dirt and brick and mortar and all sorts of fun stuff. So these streets are all made of cobblestones. They're not modern cobblestones. They're 2nd and 3rd century cobblestones. So when you walk this street, you're walking the streets that the Romans, just after the time of Peter, would have walked. and you're looking at mausoleums on this side. This is the north side of the hill. So the Tiber River is down here. The necropolis, or the obelisk, is down here. This is north. Here's south, obviously, west, and east. These mausoleums here are the oldest ones, and then the ones over on this side here are the more recent ones, more recent 3rd century and 4th century. So that gives you a sense of what this all looks like. And here is the modern St. Peter's, and then this is the only area that's been excavated. It's 30 by 50 meters, roughly. In reality, it goes all the way out here. So if you've been in Rome, and you've walked out the front of the Piazza of St. Peter's, and you've crossed the street dodging the cars, and you've managed not to get hit by anybody, and you walk into the bookstore, which is over here. If you walk down in the basement of the bookstore, you get to the top of a facade of a necropolis, or of a mausoleum from that necropolis from the same time period. It goes all the way underneath the street. But that's all that we got for a couple of reasons. One, because there's a pretty big retaining wall right here, which if you remove, you have some problems on the upper floor. And then over here, the excavators got to what they were trying to find, which was the remains of the area around the high altar. Just a couple of pictures to show people what's inside. Ancient Rome is remarkable not only because it's old, but because it's incredibly well made. It's breathtakingly beautiful. So these are frescoes on the walls, which still survive today. This is known as the Tomb of the Teacher, for one of two reasons. Either the more common understanding is because this is the man who's died, he was a teacher, and here's the pupil who's coming to be taught by him. Although there's been some speculation that actually this is a Christian grave, and that this represents the Lord, who's holding the book of the living, to see if this man's name is in the book of life. The reason for that is, it's conjecture anyway, it looks like in detail that this man's face might actually be wrapped with some sort of burial shroud, which would mean that this is the dead man here, and not that one. But anyway, it's an old, beautiful fresco nonetheless. This is the first mausoleum that you see when you walk down into the necropolis. It's known as the Tomb of the Egyptians, because there are, on the walls up here, frescoes of a couple different Egyptian deities, Isis and Amun-Ra and Horus. It also has this incredibly beautiful sarcophagus depicting the Dionysian cult. Dionysus, or Bacchus, was a really popular god at the time of 1st, 2nd, 3rd century, and earlier before that. Dionysus is the god of wine and sex and pleasure, and so you can see why that was pretty popular for people. And they put him on this, he's kind of dragging the funeral urn here, and it's supposed to be the well-wishers, hoping that the person who's died is about to experience a good time. So that's what's depicted on there. This is actually the last mausoleum that's found, and it's significant. Significant because of this thing up here. This is known as a titular plate, or the titular means name in Latin, title. And it's something like a headstone for us today. The reason why it's significant is because this has the man's last will and testament written on it. So this is his grave, which has been left as it was. This shows you what the whole area used to look like. This is what the guy's last will and testament says. From the testament, written on the 3 leaves of Popilius Heracla, Gaius Popilius Heracla to his heirs greeted. I ask you, my heirs, I order you, and I rely on your good faith, to build me a tomb on the Vatican Hill, near the Circus, next to the tomb of Ulpius Narcissus, at a cost of 6,000 sesterces. This purpose Novia Trophy, that part's not really exciting, but the significant thing is that he's identifying, we've got a primary source telling us this is the Vatican Hill and we're near the Circus, which tradition has always said is where Peter dies. He dies on the Vatican Hill, near the Circus. Well, we couldn't find anything from the Circus. We weren't sure if we had the Vatican Hill. But this tells us we must, because you're not going to put a headstone on top of a man's grave if he's not buried there. Wouldn't make any sense. So it's a primary source telling us that we're in fact at the hill and next to the Circus. Again, just the insides of the remains of one of the mausoleums. These here are niches for burial ashes. So the Romans actually practiced burial in 2 ways. by cremation or by inhumation. They do them both. They would burn the body and put the ashes in there, or they would put the body in a sarcophagus, which literally means flesh eater. That's the purpose of a sarcophagus. You put the body inside the sarcophagus, the flesh decays, you pull the bones out, you take those bones, put them with the rest of the family's bones, put another body in the sarcophagus, and you just keep doing it. Yeah. And all be one together. Now the remains of one of the mausoleums inside. And this one's significant. It's just there's a great image of one of the flesh eaters in the sarcophagus. So here's the titular's plate on top of the sarcophagus. What they would do is they would erase these. They just rub them out. You could buy, you could go down to Costco and you buy a sarcophagus. I'm walking home with a couple of people playing the flute and the guy in the front, nice little couple of little designs up here, and then you carve in your own titular's plate, and then you pull that body out and you put a new plate up there. Just rub it out. There's a mosaic tile floor of the abduction of Persephone into Hades, which is the reason mythologically why we have fall and winter. And Persephone gets to come out for 2 seasons a year. We get spring and summer. Here's another one of the. Here's where you can see the same mausoleum, so same family. Here's the niches for burial ashes, and here's the places where they put the bones. So this family practiced both. You see the development through time. This is, we're kind of moving our way from east to west, walking down the street, and we get into one of the mausoleums, which, while originally pagan, comes to have Christians buried inside that. We know that because of the images which are on the wall. There's 3 images. This one here is the fisherman, always been understood as either Christ the fisherman casting out his nets, or the Christians who are commanded by the Lord to put out into the deep for a catch. Here's another scene. This is Jonah being swallowed by the whale, or Jonah being vomited by the whale. Seriously. So, because Jonah being vomited out by the whale was a very common image in Christian mausoleums of the resurrection. Just as Jonah was 3 days in the belly of the whale, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the earth. It's the sign of Jonah. So, pagans didn't put Jonah on the wall. Now, the reason why this is faint and this is not is these are still the mosaic tiles on the wall. The mosaic tiles have come off, and this is just the sketch which was there for the guide, which the people put the tiles on. You can see how. Anybody make mosaics? Anybody ever make them? A lot of painstaking labor. And yet these things are just, some of them are enormous and beautiful. Here's this is actually the ceiling of that same mausoleum. So here's the fisherman's over here, Jonah's over here. And this is why we know this is Christian. This is the oldest Christian vault mosaic in the world. It's from the middle of the 3rd century. It's a Christianization of a pagan scene. Here's the pagan scene. This is, in pagan mythology, this would be the god Helios, or Apollo, who drives his chariots, and behind the chariots, or from outside of his head, either way, Apollo or Helios is the sun god, would be the sun shining. All right? But in every depiction of Apollo or Helios, the rays, which are here coming out from behind his head, see those? The rays would just look like the way a kid would draw a sun. So they draw a ball, and then lines coming out all over. Right? Except these rays here form the shape of a cross. So what the Christians have done, they used to do this all the time. That's why the Christians use the symbol of the fish. Because Christianity is illegal. You can't be a Christian. It's illegal for you to exist. From the time of Nero until the time of Constantine, if you're a Christian, you have no legal right to exist. So they had to hide. It's not like they get killed all the time, but they could have been. So they would just they would hide themselves under different symbols. The fish was one because the fish in Greek, the letters that spell out fish, the Greek word for fish, ichthus, are alliteration for Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. That's what ichthus stands for, or spells out. Here we see Helios, who is the one who brings the sun to the rest of the gods, become Jesus, who is the true Son of God, who brings not the light of the sun, but the light that is himself to all of creation. Oh, notice the hole. The hole was made in the 16th century when they were building the new basilica. So one of the workers, as he's working on his back, as they're building the new basilica, falls through this hole, hits his head, looks up, says, "I think I see something." They say, "Yeah, I'm sure you do." They hand him some paper. He draws a sketch. They take it, they put it in the Vatican archives. 400 years later, when the archaeologists are going through the mausoleums, and they get to this, they find this, and one of the guys who's very familiar with the archives says, "I think we've seen this before." Pull it out, sure enough, this is the sketch that the man draws, which hopefully provokes the question, so if in the 16th century they find that, why didn't they do anything? I mean, if it's modern America, we would have just ripped the whole place up, moved Peter to another location, and dug up the whole area. Well, they don't do it for a couple of reasons. One, they don't have the curiosity that we do. And two, they have an incredibly healthy respect for the dead, and especially for the saints. In fact, in 594, Pope Gregory the Great gets a letter from an empress somewhere over in the east, and she asks if she can have Paul's head for her private chapel. No small request, huh? "Dear Pope, I'd like to have the head of Paul for my private chapel, please." Gregory writes back saying something like, "Gee, that's nice, we don't give that out. However, if you'd like, give me something that you'd like blessed, I'll put it on a string and I'll lower it down to Paul's grave." And he goes on to say, in essence, that to meddle where you shouldn't meddle without an understanding of where you are is to bring trouble on yourself. He's not talking superstitiously, he's just saying you don't just carelessly play with relics. So that's why they didn't do anything. But it was found before that. Now we're getting closer to the area of Peter's grave. Still, and this is our first kind of clue that we're near Peter. This is the inside of what's known as the tomb of the Valeri. And here, hopefully you can make out a little bit here. You can see some sketchings on the wall. I think I got it. Here's a better view. Here's two faces, huh? See those? They're just kind of written on the wall in charcoal. There's a face here, here's a face. And then there's some graffiti going underneath. This is what the graffiti says. "Petrus roga prosanctis hominibus Christianis ad corpus tuum sepultis." Peter, pray for the holy Christian men who are buried near your body. So someone thinks Peter's in the area. And this has to come, it obviously doesn't come from after 312, okay? So it has to come from before 312. And they date graffiti, which is not only a common modern practice, it's a common ancient practice, from either the style the characters use in the language. This is most likely middle part of the 3rd century. So again, we got people moving in. So we're getting close to, again, this area here. This is the area of the high altar. Okay, the high altar rests above all this. So again, this is the trophy of Gaius, or the Red Bull complex. And you can see right here, see this little cutaway? There's a tile kind of oddly shaped. The reason for this is there was actually a hole cut in this, and that's how they would have lowered objects down into the grave. And then they just bring it back. So we've now walked, this is directly underneath the area of the high altar. Right over here, if we could see a larger picture, we would see the foundations for the supports of Bernini's colonnade, or the 4 big major pillars inside St. Peter's. The baldacchino, exactly. Okay, so if you've seen the baldacchino, it weighs a bit, which is why they have to be careful doing the excavations under here, because you move the foundations for the baldacchino and you have a mess upstairs. So this is the area around that. This is the alleyway. So remember when we were talking about dating this complex? And we said that on the other side of this wall, running this way, is an alleyway made of those clay tiles stamped with the owner of the factory at the tile. Well, this is the alley. And right down here, where your feet would be when you're walking past this, is the actual hole itself that all the water would have run through. And you can see the tiles going all the way up. So Peter's grave is right there. All right? And when you're in the tour, you actually walk up the stairs and you get to this level, When you get to that level, you see this. And this, you can see inside there, this column is that column. Okay? Right there. And this is the floor of Constantine's monument from 330. And you should be looking at, right now, Gregory the Great's altar. Because Gregory the Great is the first person to build a permanent altar in St. Peter's roughly around the year 600, but you don't see it. Instead, what you see is the remains of Callistus II's altar. He built an altar in 1123. He not only built it on top of Gregory's altar, he swallowed up Gregory's altar. So Gregory's has been forever lost to view inside Callistus's. And then that becomes the foundation for Clement VIII's high altar. There's another close-up of that column. And Clement VIII's high altar is the one that rests directly underneath the baldacchino. So now we're lying on our floor looking straight up. This is the dome of St. Peter's. Okay? Y'all know where we are? Yes. So if you drop a line straight down from the center, right here. And remember, when Michelangelo designs his dome, he's the one that puts the dome up. When they raised Constantine's Basilica, the first one, they destroyed the whole church, everything, except for the areas of the high altars. Why? Because they're sacred, exactly. You never destroy an altar. So everything else goes, but the area of the altar stays. So when Michelangelo designs his dome, he's got a frame of reference. He knows where to put it. And if you drop a line straight down from the very top of that, you go through all of this. So here's the dome way up here, and boom, all of a sudden you go through the altar of Clement VIII from 1586, which is on top of the altar of Callistus II from 1123, inside of which is the altar of Gregory the Great from the year 600, which is on top of Constantine's monument from around the year 330, inside of which is the trophy of Gaius, or the Red Wall Complex from 160, which rests on top of a series of walls from 104, which are on top of a series of walls from 64, which rests on top of a very simple, shallow, earthen tile grave, which is Peter. So when Jesus says to Peter, "You are rock, and upon you I will build my church," it literally doesn't. Isn't that fascinating? So here's the ancient level of the necropolis. Okay, this is 1st, 2nd, 3rd, early 4th century Rome. All right, this is the floor of Constantine's Basilica. You can see that the floor is same level as the trophy of Gaius. So you would walk into Constantine's monument from over here. This is the front of the church here. You'd walk in, and boom! Now I can just lower an object down into the grave, leave it there, or take it right away and go home. All right. This is the floor, which today is the level of the crypt. So if you've been to St. Pete's today, or you're going soon, and you get to the crypt, or the grotto, where Pope John Paul II is buried today, you're on the floor of Constantine's church. They left that there, and all the room between that floor and here's the main floor today, because the Vatican Hill is built right on, the church is right on top of the water table. So if you've been in St. Peter's, it's really humid. I mean, really humid. No one walks out dry. It's just impressively wet. That's because you're right on top of the water table. So they leave this there, this space in between the two floors, what now is the grotto and the main floor, as a protection against flooding. So here's just another quick little sketch of what we got. Main altar here. This is today's high altar. If you watch EWTN and you see a picture of Benedict celebrating Mass, he celebrates Mass at the high altar. That's underneath the dome, which is up here. That's 16th century. Here's Callistus' altar on top of that. Gregory's inside of that. Trophy of Gaius. Constantine's monument around the trophy of Gaius. Brick walls. Boom. Chapel, or Peter's grave. And then around here, we find all these other graves, which are built in such a way so as to not touch this grave, but to get as close to it as possible. And from the 5th or 6th century, there's a book known as the Liber Pontificalis, the Book of the Popes, which tells us that the first 11 successors of Peter are all buried right in front of Peter, in that same area, trying to get as close as they can to him without touching him. It's possible that that's some of the graves that we have of those people. So again, drop a straight down. The center of the dome, you go through Clement VIII's altar, 1586, Callistus second altar, 1123. The Great's altar, 600. Constantine's monument, 330. Trophy of Gaius, 160. Brick walls, 100. Brick walls, 80. And the original tile grave of Peter from 64. There is no question whatsoever that we have Peter's grave. That was the official report, unanimously accepted by every archaeologist and historian when it came out, and subsequently too. So inside the grave we found that. What a weapon! Huh? We find a lot of things inside the grave. We find a lot of dirt. Okay? We find coins going from all over the empire, going all the way back to the 2nd century. You find things like this. This is a votive offering. Huh? So this is something that someone would take to the grave and they'd leave there. This is someone who's either blind or has an eye disease, asking Peter to pray for them so that their eyes will get better. So you've been to Lourdes, or you've been to St. Anne de Beaupré, or you've been to places where people go on pilgrimage, asking for healing of one kind or another. And you walk into the church, and over here there's an altar, and there's crutches kind of like stapled to the wall, right? People who've been healed. They just leave their crutches there, or whatever. So here's something similar. There's someone who has come back to thank Peter for his intercession so as to bring healing for eyes. There were bones found in the grave, but the bones turned out to be the bones of 3 different people. 2 of them are women, and the males are of far too young an age to even remotely be considered Peter's. So inside Peter's grave, as they say in Italian, Peter non c'è. He's not there. All right? So everything depends upon, we've got to go back to this, this structure here, built in the middle of the 2nd century. Sometime after it's built, maybe close to the year 200, maybe a little bit before that, right about where the screen ends, or the photo ends, this wall begins to crack. So the people built this. Okay? This gives you a sense of scale. They built this little wall. This is known as Wall G. Isn't that exciting? So they built Wall G to buttress this crack, not to keep the crack from spreading. About another 10 years later, they built something like Wall G over here, simply because when you only have Wall G, this looks pretty ugly. All right? And this is built like it's built because there's nothing that would tell you this is Christian. Intentionally so. Nothing. So this is built because if you can remember that kind of like cartoon color drawing that we have of the Red Wall complex in the hill, it's surrounded by all these mausoleums. This just blends in wonderfully. So the Christians can come without the risk of their lives. They have risks of their lives, but there's no reason for someone to suspect that they're Christian. They can come, they can pray at Peter's grave, and they can leave without anybody knowing to go to Peter's grave. Because if the authorities find out Peter's buried here, they dig him up and throw him in the river. So they built this thing, this Wall G. And then when Constantine, this is Constantine's monument. So here's the marble, and this is the porphyry. Okay? This rich purple-looking color here. When Constantine builds this, and remember, when he builds that, all he does is enclose this monument, but he also encloses this. So he puts a meaningless wall, which is built for construction purposes, to keep this crack from spreading. He puts all of that inside this, even though this is Peter's grave right down here. He puts this wall right here. So here's the monument that Constantine builds, made out of marble and porphyry. It looks like this, and he encloses that wall. This is the back side of Constantine's monument. So this structure here, this is the front of it. On the back, it has one of these strips like that of porphyry going straight down through the center of it. That's what it looks like. So that's the back of a 4th century monument from Constantine. You with me? This is the foundation for Callistus' altar, which has Gregory's inside of it, which is the foundation for Clement VIII's. Underneath it, inside of this, is the trophy of Gaius. Underneath it are all the brick walls and the tile grave. So we're now looking, we're at the back of St. Peter's, we're looking down towards the Tiber River, we're looking due east, looking that way. All right? This monument, this wall here, is enclosed inside of Constantine's monument, and this is kind of another drawing for us. So this is Constantine's monument. Here's this red wall complex, the structure from the 2nd century. And inside this wall, this apparently meaningless wall, this one here, is this. Now, this has the little abbreviation L for localus, or little place, okay, box. This, when the excavators get to this area, and they find this wall, which is enclosed inside this structure, they come to find out that this area here is a wall which has been hollowed out and lined with marble, and then sealed back up. And then Constantine puts it all inside his edifice. All right. Inside, this is what the wall looks like. This is known as wall G for graffiti. Okay, it's covered with graffiti all over it. And this is the hole. This all used to be sealed up. The excavators break through this as they're kind of feeling their way through it. And as they're breaking through, they find this structure. Okay? So on this wall is all this ancient graffiti, like this. Okay, that's the Kiro. Kiro is the first 2 letters of Christ's name in Greek. So Kiro ends here. But then it's also found like that, which is now the first 2 letters of Christ's name in Greek, and the first 2 letters of Peter's name in Latin. So Greek and Latin are both being used in the empire at the time. So now you have a symbol for the Lord and a symbol for Peter wedded together in the very same symbol. It's also, I don't have a slide like this, but if you turn this 90 degrees, and it's now going landscape as opposed to portrait, it looks like a key. Wonder why that would be. You also find, Peter's giving the keys in case you don't know what that is. You also find graffiti like this. There's not 4 lines on the wall. This is 1 line on the wall, and each line something different is highlighted. So what this is here's the Kiro, Christ's first 2 letters in Greek. Here's the P-E, first 2 letters of Peter's name in Latin. Here's Maria, or Mary. And here's Nika. Nika is why Nike makes lots of shoes. Because Nike is the goddess of victory. So Nika is the word for victory. So what this is a prayer to the Lord for victory, asking the intercession of Peter and Mary. Written by someone coming to Peter's grave at a time when Christians are forbidden to exist. So we look at this and we just look at it and think, oh, that's not that cool. Someone's scratching that on the wall, knowing that they live in the midst of an empire which does not tolerate them and oftentimes just wants to kill them. That's this symbol here is what's on the bottom of my chalice, or my paten. So a priest has both a chalice, which holds the precious blood, and a paten, which is the Latin word for plate. So my paten, which was a gift from my parents, has this on the bottom of it. So in fact, the 3 of us who kind of worked an awful lot in the scouting all have that on the bottom of our patens. So it's very good for us to be in communion with each other at the altar, but also just to remember all the fun that we had in Rome. Now, if you can imagine back to this spot here. Okay, this wall here, which gets broken away. So this is wall G. Here's the little empty box lined with marble. This here is a piece of that wall which has fallen in. They found this when they broke it open. It has written on it Petrus Eni in Greek. Petrus Eni. Eni is Petrus, pretty obvious. Eni is a bit more problematic. Eni could be, you can see here's Eni here. E, we translate as an N and I. Eni could be the beginning of a word, or it could be a word on its own. If it's a word on its own, it means Peter is inside. Or Peter is within. Written on a graffiti wall inside of which has this marble-lined box, which Constantine, for some unknown reason, encloses inside his structure. This is what the marble box looks like. So it's just like a little shoebox. It's a little bit higher. So here's you can see the red wall back here. So they just hollowed it out and lined it with marble. There's some more here. You can see some more of the graffiti written on the wall. Inside here, inside the box, they find lots of things. They found soil, and they find strings and threads. Okay, the threads are these. This is a detail of the thread. I'm afraid it's too big that we lose some of the detail, but it's purple and gold. Gold probably gets our attention. Purple's more significant than gold. Because again, purple can only be worn or used by those of at least senatorial class. So somebody both has access to purple and is trying to show the worth of what's wrapped inside the purple. Okay? Here's some more strings. So here's the gold fragments. This is the porphyry. More the bands of gold, purple thread. More again. More still. Looks like amoebas floating. And we find bones. This is a skeletal, or a sketch of the skeletal remains of the bones that we find inside this locus, of this hollowed out cavity. We know Peter's crucified. We know that from the gospel. And we know it specifically from John chapter 21, where Jesus says to Peter, "Truly, truly, when you were young, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted to go. The days are coming when someone else will dress you. You will stretch out your hands, and they will take you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to him to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. That's because the expression, "stretch out your hands," is a euphemism for crucifixion. So we find it in plays 200 years before Jesus. It's the expression for a crucifixion. Here's a Greek or Latin playwright, Plautus, talking about it. The expression "stretch out your hands" is characteristic of those condemned to the cross. So John's gospel is written, it can be anywhere from 80 to 100. Certainly after the time Peter dies. That's not to say that Jesus hasn't predicted how Peter's going to die. What it is to say is that John is reminding the Christian community how he dies. We know he's crucified. So who is this man that we found? Well, this is what we know. When Constantine built his monument, he included an apparently meaningless wall. Inside of this wall, there was made a hollowed-out cavity lined with marble. Inside the cavity, we found purple cloth interwoven with gold thread. The cloths and threads were wrapped around bones, obviously according them the utmost dignity, remembering that purple could only be worn by those at least of senatorial class. The anthropological examination of the bones reveals that the bones belong to one person. Okay, not three like were in the original grave. The person's male, you can tell that from the hips and from the structure around that area. Of a rather robust constitution, he is roughly 5'5", maybe 160 pounds. Who dies between the ages of 60 and 70. If Peter is contemporary with Jesus, and we have every reason to believe so, then Peter would be roughly 65 or so, because Jesus would be roughly 65 or so. The bones have earth encrusted in them. Now that's very significant, because it tells you that the bones weren't originally placed inside a marble box. The bones were originally in the ground. The earth clinging to the bones, after it's been examined, petrography is a study of rocks, and Peters' rock, Peter's rock, was identical to the earth found in the original grave. So the dirt and the soil inside the bones, inside of the man found in the marble box, matches identically the soil inside Peter's grave. Now that may not sound like a big deal until you remember that Constantine moves 1 million cubic feet of dirt. And when you combine that with the erosion that happens in Rome, and when you do a soil content analysis inside the area around Peter's grave, it's different every square meter. In fact, the only place that we find earth that matches the earth which is clinging to the bones is in the original grave. The rest of the area is this blue clay and yellow sand. And we have parts from his whole body, except his feet. So here's his body. we said we know Peter's crucified. We know that from the Gospels. It's a later tradition that Peter's crucified upside down. It actually starts coming from the 3rd century. Origen says, writing in the 3rd century, Peter was crucified at Rome with his head downwards. This is one of Michelangelo's paintings of the crucifixion of Peter. As he himself had desired to suffer. This is Caravaggio's rendering of Peter's crucifixion. So the tradition is that Peter, when he's executed, and we know the Romans execute people in many different ways. St. Andrew's crucified on a cross shaped like an X. Anybody golf? Anybody ever been to St. Andrew's? Anybody know the crest of St. Andrew's? 2 golf clubs crossed like this. Do you ever wonder why? Did you know St. Andrew's is named for Andrew, the brother of Peter? Did you know that? St. Andrew's is named for Andrew, the brother of Peter. Why? Because Andrew's relics were brought from Greece to Scotland. And St. Andrew's is known as, was known as for a while, the resting place of Andrew's remains. And so the crest for, or the logo for St. Andrew's Golf Club are 2 golf clubs crossed, reminiscent of the Andrew's cross. So Andrew's crucified on a cross shaped like an X. So it's totally plausible that they would crucify Peter upside down. They would do it any old way they could. But if Peter's crucified upside down, come on, baby. Sorry, whoa, hey, come back. Stop that.
Just wait.
Yes, sir, I hear the voice of Peter. Go back. So if Peter's crucified upside down, presumably the easiest way to get him off a cross in the middle of a mass execution is just to chop off his feet. Which makes perfect sense. 1968, the conclusion of the Year of Faith. So we had the Year of the Eucharist in last October. 1968 was the Year of Faith set by Pope Paul VI. June 26, 1968, Pope Paul says, "New, most patient research and accurate investigations have been subsequently pursued, with the result that, relying on the judgment of worthy and prudent persons, namely all the archaeologists, we believe to be positive. The relics of St. Peter have been identified in a manner that we deem convincing, and we give praise to you who pledged most attentive study and long and great toil. It seems proper for us, at the present state of archaeological and scientific conclusions, to give to you and the Church the happy announcement. We have every reason to believe that there have been discovered few but sacrosanct immortal remains of the Prince of the Apostles." The bones, after having been analyzed, were taken out, they were cleaned a little bit, and they were put back inside here. So when you go, if you've been on this excavations, you can walk into the room where this is standing, and you can see just inside there what looks like this. A whole series of acrylic boxes, inside of which the bones of the body have been placed according to parts of the body. This is inside St. Pete's. So here's the Baldacchino. So when we were walking underneath the alleyway, we were like right underneath this area here. So we were just near the foundations for this column and between the foundations for that column. This is the altar of Clement VIII. Here's the Holy Spirit window. This is the back of the church. Underneath the main altar is what's known as the Confessio, or the niche of the pallium. Okay? So down in here, there's a little mosaic of Jesus and then this gold chest. Oftentimes when people come here, they think that this is where Peter's bones are. Right here in this gold chest. Looks like this. So now we've gone down below. So this is the level of the crypt. If you've been at the level of the crypt, where Pope John Paul II is buried now, this is the level of the crypt. The scavi is 25 feet below that. So the main altar is up above us. There's stairways that go up here, and stairways that go up here. And here's this ancient mosaic of the Lord, and inside here's a gold chest. There are no bones in there. What's placed inside there are what's called the pallia. So if you've seen a picture of any of the metropolitans, an archbishop, they wear a white strip of cloth around their neck, It has a series of crosses on it. The cloth is placed inside this on the Feast of St. Agnes, which is January 21st? February? No, it's January 21st? Yeah. Right in here. And then it's taken out, and on the Feast of St. Peter and Paul in June, the Holy Father bestows those pallia atop the shoulders of the metropolitans, and then they're buried with those. Okay, so anytime you see a picture of the Pope or Cardinal Maida, you always see this white strip of cloth in the front, and it's hanging in the back, and it's got these black crosses on it. That came from in here, and it was left here just like the ancient Christians used to come and leave something in Peter's grave and then bring back. So the Holy Father brings these to Peter's grave, the man that he succeeds, asks the intercession of the first Good Shepherd, or the one who knew the Good Shepherd, and then takes him back and puts him on the shoulders of his metropolitans on the Feast of Peter and Paul. But notice this little structure. Does it look odd in any way?
Off-center.
Say that again.
It's off-center.
It's off-center. Yeah. Why in the world would anything in St. Peter's be off-center? Because wall G is off-center. Exactly. Okay, so when we're looking at this, we are looking at this structure. So the mosaic of Jesus is right here. It's right there. It hangs directly in front of them. And this is the niche of the palette. And the reason why it's off-center is because, and it's off-center because the ancient basilica was structured like this because it had this wall in it. And that mosaic, which is the only thing which was in the same place in the original basilica and the modern basilica, rested there. So it's a constant reminder of the fact that in this place, which is kind of jarring to the eye because it's off-center, it's like it is because it encloses this structure inside of which this box which had the remains of Peter. We come here. Whether we go down a slideshow or whether we go to St. Pete's for real, what we do is we go on pilgrimage. We go on pilgrimage to the grave of a man who knew Jesus. The grave of a man who was there when Jesus said, "Do this in memory of me." The grave of a man to whom Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." And so much did this man take seriously the Lord's command to feed his sheep, that when the time came for him either to run or to suffer and to die, he chose to suffer and to die. So he's executed by an empire which does not care for anything that he is standing for. And what is it that he's standing for? He's standing for the witness to the truth that God is so in love with us that he would become man, suffer, die, rise from the dead, and offer to us eternal life. That's what he's a witness to. And as we visit him, whether we visit him for real, or we visit him virtually through the wonders of technology, so he pleads with us here tonight to come to know this truth more deeply, that the Lord does love us that much, and implores us to go out and to bear witness to the same thing in the world in which we live, a world which more and more every single day becomes more like the world in which Peter lived. A world which does not know Jesus, has never heard his name except in vain, does not know the Gospels, could not quote you a parable to save their life. And they're hungry as all get out to know the truth. And the truth sets us free, Jesus says. And the truth is not a theorem or a proposition or a series of ideas. The truth is a person. His name is Jesus, who continues to call us to every bit as real a friendship as he called Peter, and continues to give himself to us every day if we choose in the Eucharist. How incredibly fortunate are we? We haven't been blessed just for ourselves. We've been blessed so as to share it. So may Peter pray for us so that you and I would be like him and go out into the world and let down our nets for a catch of fish, not the kind that swim in the water, but the kind, the men and the women and the children all around us Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Father, we thank you for the great gift of the saints. We thank you for the way that you use ordinary men and women just like us and call us to a relationship with you and transform their lives and send them out into the world so as to testify to the truth that you have sent your Son for us to save and to redeem us and to call us to friendship. Father, we pray that through the intercession of St. Peter and Our Lady and St. Anastasia and all our patron saints here in this room, that you would use us. You would help us to understand that each one of us is entrusted with the responsibility and the great privilege of bearing witness to you and to your name and to the great things you've done for us in the world in which we live, at work and at school and at home and in every situation that we find ourselves. Lord, give us courage like you gave to Peter. Give us grace. Give us humility. Help us to grow in charity, to be models of joy, so that people would know that there's something different, and that we would be able to testify that the difference is you and not us. And all these things we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. All right, any questions?
Excavation to discover bones, there must not have been any written evidence that Constantine was actually preserving Peter's remains.
We don't know if Constantine knows that those are Peter's remains or not. The simplest explanation for that is that while Constantine is now friendly to the Christians and he's building these buildings, which is great. This is 330, so he's building it. Less than 30 years before this, the Christians have undergone the fiercest of all the persecutions that they've undergone underneath Rome. So they've lived through times of the Roman emperors being favorable, or at least lenient to them, and then becoming brutal to them. So it's possible anyway that the Christians wouldn't tell them that these are the bones here, but simply say that if you really want to build a monument, this is where you got to build it. We don't know. But for whatever reason, Constantine's got everything inside that box. Either he just listens to the Christians without knowing, or he does know and they really trust them. We aren't sure. Yeah.
Father John, are the skeletal remains of Peter intact? I mean, are there any broken bones? Anything like that? Any broken bones? And how was he dated? Is it carbon dating?
They don't carbon date because the carbon date something destroys what you carbon date. So they won't do that because it'll destroy a relic. So they date it from, you mean the aging of the person?
Yeah, how did they come up with the date?
Of 60 to 70 years old?
Yeah, I believe it's accurate, but I was just wondering what they were using.
You date, so far as I understand, in terms of, the way, whatever that would be, osteo, whatever, in the sense of studying bones, bone density, things like that, to be able to determine whether or not it's a younger bone or an older bone. So far as I know. I'm not sure that I can get more into it, but I'm not sure that.
Are the ankles missing or the actual foot of the skeletal?
If I remember, and I won't remember, don't quote me. Off the top of my head, I want to say that there are bits and pieces of the ankle bone.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Was the hole in wall G there, or did the excavators make it? And if they did they make it because of the graffiti, or was it dumb luck?
It's dumb luck. So the hole is, remember the wall G is built sometime before the Constantine monument is built. Wall G has the little place hollowed out, the little shoebox hollowed out. After it's hollowed out, the bones are put in it, and then it's sealed again. It's re-plastered, if you will. Okay? As they're probing around in the graffiti, and they're doing stuff with the wall, they detect that part of it, as they're chiseling things, part of it just cracks and reveals the hollow cavity. In that regard, it's sheer dumb luck. Yeah.
This is just a real quick question. How do you get down there? Where is the stairway that's the access to the lower section?
To the scavi or to the crypt? You can walk into the crypt if you're walking straight into St. Pete's and you get to the area right in front of the high altar.
Right.
If you take either a right or a left, there are two stairways.
See, I remember the stairway on the left, but I didn't know if I remember correctly or not.
Right. But then to get into the actual excavations, you have to go through the Swiss Guard, which most people would never think to do. And they won't let you go through unless you tell them I'm going to the scavi. So then you go through and then you get to that area where the monument on the floor is outside, which tells you where the obelisk originally was. Just to the right of that is the entryway to the excavations. So you need to know that it's there, and then you need to know how to find it, and you need to know how to get there. And then the Italians, Italian I can say it, they're not really user friendly. So it's a gift for you to be able to come here. We're not here to serve you. That's the mentality oftentimes at the excavations, which is a bit annoying. So you can go to Rome and say, hey, I'm going to go to Rome. I'm going to be in town for 5 days. Any chance of, like Father Thomas is going to be there in June. Any chance of, getting a tour to the excavations? And they go, we don't know. Okay, well, can I leave it where I'm going to stay? Yeah, leave where you're going to stay. Maybe we'll call you. Can you give me an idea when the tour might be? It could be Monday through Friday. All right, thank you. So it's annoying that way. Yeah.
Who was the Pope at the time of Constantine, and was he probably most likely overseeing all this?
Sylvester.
And he was overseeing the construction.
Yes. Sylvester is the Pope. The first one not to be martyred. So the first Pope not to be martyred after Peter is the Pope at the age of Constantine. 250. Every president in the history of our country, that's the equivalent, being assassinated. We're still in trauma from 2, and a couple of people being shot. Every single president assassinated. That's what it was like in the church at the beginning.
Given the significance of where the original obelisk was, what was behind its moving?
What was behind its moving? Why did they move the obelisk? Because Sixtus V was a lot like Nero. Didn't quite reach megalomaniac stage, but he was he wanted to put his own stamp on Rome. So I don't mean that entirely so, but he had a bit of an ego. So he's trying to remake Rome. So he actually makes Rome to be the modern city that it is. Many of us probably think that Rome was always just this wonderful city. I mean, Rome is a sheer pit during the Mid-Ages. Rome is not the place of pilgrimage. Rome's a swamp. Malaria comes from Italy. It means bad air, evil air, malaria is what it means. And so people used to think that the air was bad there for lots of different reasons. They didn't understand that the mosquitoes were coming out of the swamps and whatnot and killing people. So malaria is evil air. And Rome is an oppressive place in the summer. It's very hot. It's very humid. It's very rainy at times. And so it's not this wonderful place to go. Sixtus actually makes it to be a place, and the whole building of St. Peter's again is what makes St. Peter or Rome to be a tremendous place of pilgrimage again. So he moves every obelisk in the whole city and makes the modern roadways to be the way they are, which is a great gift because they're quite well done. All right. Oh, come on. I thought that was the front there.
Is there any conjecture about who the 2 women and the young man are in the original grave?
No, we have no idea who they are. They could be decoys. I mean, really, they could be all sorts of things. They could just be people who want to get buried in the grave. We have no way of knowing. Again, remember that while the pagans are moving out, the Christians are coming in, and they're trying to get people as close to, if they can't get to Peter's grave, as close to Peter's grave as they possibly can. And so, for big grief to be actually buried in the grave is a remarkable thing.
Maybe it's Mary Magdalene and Jesus because they were.
Could be Mary Magdalene and her son. Dan Brown's third now. There you go. Absolutely.
Well, I would like to let him know you said that.
Please do. That's right. Peter's mother-in-law.
Constantine was building the Basilica, and he was moving that dirt. Now, that was still the 3rd century.
4th century.
4th century?
Roughly 330.
Was slavery still in Rome at that time, or was it abolished by that time? Even though there was
No, you still got slaves. Although Constantine actually he's the first one to start moving the dirt. You can bet his hands weren't real dirty after that, but he moves the first bucket.
That's what I thought. Did the slaves actually move that million cubic feet to build the Basilica?
No, it's a mix of people who do it. And again, we hear slavery. Slavery is never a great thing, so let's make that clear. But we hear slavery in an American lens, and we think of the brutality of what we did to the Africans, okay, in particular. Slavery in Greek and Roman times could be brutal. It could also be almost family. For example, the one titular plate that we looked at, which identifies the area as he wants to be buried in the Vatican Hill next to the circus, his will goes on to say, and I bequeath freedom to my slaves, which was a very common thing. So you have this whole race that you even see in the Acts of the Apostles on a number of occasions, the synagogue of freedmen. Because you have people who have either bought their freedom, have inherited their freedom, or whatnot. It's so hard, I think, for us in the 21st century to grasp the difference in class structures. So there are slaves involved, but they're not slaves in the way that we would think of it.
That we have learned to have a concept of slavery.
Exactly. Anything else? How about a round for the knights? Huh? Great job, guys. Thanks everyone for coming out. It's pouring rain out there, so have a brownie or a cookie or run to your car. It's great to have you. God bless. Have a great night.